Ah!
Hi, this is the Professional Amateur Hour coming to you with another review. This week, I checked out Poor Things, and this 2023 film was directed by Yorgos Lanthimos and stars Emma Stone, Mark Ruffalo, and Willem Dafoe, among others, of course. So with Poor Things, you may have heard of it. It's won like 4 Oscars and was nominated for quite a few more. I was actually watching the Oscars, with my partner, and like Poor Things kept coming up again and again and again, and I actually just started like guessing Poor Things would win, and by the end I think they won 4 or 5 or something. And so what is this movie actually about? Well, with this one, it's about Emma Stone's character, and in the beginning stages of this movie, it's all black and white in the start, and it turns out that Willem Dafoe is like this mad scientist, like this Frankenstein scientist type of character, and he finds Emma Stone's body in the river, and so he takes it back to his laboratory and reanimates it somehow. And so Emma Stone is alive again. However, she has kind of like lost all of her memory and her mind and is essentially like a child again. So she has to grow up, in rapid succession inside Willem Dafoe's house. And then she realizes that she's kind of like a prisoner there, so she wants out. And after, some stuff happens, Willem Dafoe lets her go. And so she goes out into the world. She gets a boyfriend in Mark Ruffalo. And of course, she experiences the world. Her world, though, involves a lot of sex and her own sexual awakening. What will happen, though? Well, for that, you gotta watch this movie and find out. Alright, so what can we say about Poor Things? Well, with this one, I had actually only heard of it because I was watching the Oscars with my partner. The Oscars were banned back where we used to be, so we thought, why not watch it? And this movie kept coming up in nominations and it kept winning. I eventually just started like picking it as, guessing who the winner might be. I didn't watch too many, Oscar films this year, but it did win quite a bit. So we were kind of curious about what this movie was about. So we did watch it. And with this one, I gotta say, it is a very bizarre movie. It's kind of like Frankenstein, but Frankenstein meets like the Barbie movie. It's a very kind of strange combination. I would say that the overall impression that I got was very much a B movie, an Oscar-winning B movie, if you will. I thought it was just so many corny things in there, so many things that I guess are kind of like more experimental than you would otherwise have in like a major film. I certainly would make comparisons with other kind of experimental films of the past. I think like Holy Mountain came to mind, especially with the music and kind of the more sexualized nature of this movie. And so that certainly is in there. I think with Holy Mountain, that's, far beyond the bizarre of this one, but this one certainly has a ton of bizarre moments in it. And I've actually heard this movie described as like a more feminist version of the Barbie movie, which clearly did fight the patriarchy, but this one goes beyond just that into like hardcore fighting the patriarchy. And so if you didn't like the Barbie movie, you're not going to like this one. But if you did like the Barbie movie, maybe this is something to watch. It certainly has a strangeness that is not as self-aware as the Barbie movie, I think. And I think that partly goes into kind of the whole way it's trying to present itself. It is also certainly giving a message more than anything else, just like, the Barbie movie. With this one, the message is very subversive, I think, to our society, where, there are kind of these social standards on both men and women, and it's saying stuff about that and certainly trying to say stuff about that, and I loved it for it, that's for sure. They are trying to talk about, for the most part at least, how women have these sexual standards put on them by polite society, and they kind of have to follow them. And so this movie very much goes against the social rules for women in our society and essentially asks, what if women had sexual freedom for whatever they wanted, right? And that certainly is also in there, and it does make the audience uncomfortable, I think, and it's trying to do that as well to kind of, I guess, not enforce change, but encourage change in our society so that we can have this more kind of equal grounding and this more freedom for everyone, I would say. And it's supposed to make people uncomfortable. Like if you're a person that, likes how society is, and even then, maybe not, necessarily today, but in yesteryear, this is going to make you uncomfortable. This is not going to be the movie for you, that's for sure. But, overall, I would say like B-movie lovers can certainly turn this one on. It's a strange one. It's subversive. It's kind of interesting, I guess. The music, we'll talk about all the bad stuff, of course, but yeah, it's just like an Oscar-winning B-movie, and it's very fascinating that way. Also, with this one, there are some standout performances, I would say. Willem Dafoe, I loved his character. I loved his performance. He's the Frankenstein guy, and he's got all this makeup on, and it's really kind of cool as well. I think this one actually won Best Oscar for its makeup and hairstyling. There's also Mark Ruffalo, and I think he does a good job as well, or at least for the movie that he's in. I think his acting is very over the top for the most part, OTT for sure. And I think that comes from kind of understanding of his role inside this bizarre movie as well. So all of the supporting characters and supporting actors, I gotta say, did a good job. And that brings me into what doesn't work with this film. Well, with this one, I've already mentioned it was nominated for a bunch of Oscars and even won some as well. And having watched it, I don't think all of those nominations and actual awards were deserved, and we'll certainly talk about it. With this one, the biggest thing, I think, was the music throughout the whole thing, and it was nominated for Best Original Score. So I was actually really surprised when I heard all of the music in this one. Just going through the whole thing, I was like, this music is terrible, like throughout the whole thing. It reminds me very much of, the Holy Mountain music, and that's this like 70s, experimental instruments that just becomes like noise, and this one is very noisy as well. I'm sure I can't give you a long sample of anything, but I'll give you 10 seconds here. And so I think that was kind of emblematic of the music overall. So very kind of not nice music sometimes. And so that was certainly, not the best. In addition, this movie did win Best Actress at the Oscars as well for Emma Stone's portrayal of her character. I think her character is called Bella. And I would not have given that to her, to tell you the truth. I just think she's like the weakest actor in the whole thing. I've seen her in other things and she's, fine. I actually quite enjoy her acting. But with this one, she's supposed to be like, I guess, a corpse, but then she can't like bend her arms or her legs. And so the whole thing, she's like walking around as if she was like a Barbie. And then her facial expressions, I guess, are very kind of stiff as well. I understand, you're supposed to be a corpse. And that is just not like how this type of stuff works, I think. Like she's doing this strange walk throughout the whole movie, or at least up until the end, where it seems like she becomes this, a regular person, or her mind is matched up with her body's age or whatever. And so this one, yeah, she's just walking around like a plastic Barbie the whole time. And it just seems like not really kind of how the character would develop. Like the character has learned all of this sexual stuff as well and hasn't learned how to move their legs. It's like, what's going on with that? And so, yeah, that was just one thing that just stood out to me as something that didn't quite match up to what I had heard about it before. And with that being said, the character's speech is also very strange as well. Most of this movie is supposed to take place in like a Victorian English setting. And so she has this like Victorian broken English to go along with. And so that kind of made it hard, especially if you're a language learner. I imagine that would be kind of odd to hear. So, use subtitles. And that just kind of added to the overall kind of poor reception, at least that I had, of the character. Other than that, there are quite a few other things. Like I talked to my coworkers about this and they had seen it and they kind of had a very kind of similar opinion. Like they didn't really appreciate, I guess is the word I would go for, all of the different strange elements of it. And certainly, with this one, none of that's lost on me. It just seemed like sometimes it was a little bit heavy-handed and pretentious with what they did. One, it's like over 2 hours. It's 2 hours 20 minutes, so it is quite a long one. And even then, like the first 45-50 minutes is in black and white. And so that was just one of those things that, I don't know, it's very kind of pretentious, I would say. And believe me, when it becomes color with her first kind of sexual experience, that is not lost on me. Like, I understand what's going on with the symbolism of all that different type of stuff. And we aren't also prudes at our, work. And so like all of us were just like, it was just like uncomfortable sometimes, and like sometimes just like preachy, and just, I don't know, it's just, I think is going to come across as something that's not for a regular audience. Certainly that's, what it comes across as. And so, it's first black and white, then color, and then all the weird sexual stuff that happens in there as well. Really does give it for one of these movies that I would imagine, would become a cult classic in later years. In 50 years, people are going to see this again and be like, how did it only get 4 or whatever? Or even then, I would ask, like, how is this strange movie getting Oscars? I think that's kind of the biggest kind of question that came out of my experience watching this. How did it win these 4 Oscars? And how did it get nominated for like 12 or something even? And so, yeah, very kind of strange one, though I do think it is ultimately kind of worth seeing, especially if you're a B-movie lover. You can kind of watch it on a different level than it was probably, intended for. And I think that's probably like the best way to watch it. Maybe even ironically would be fine as well. And so, yeah, it's just, I think, an interesting experience, one that is, out there for some people to enjoy, I guess. As for a recommendation, well, if you're a fan of those experimental movies from the 70s and 60s, then yeah, check this one out. This one's going to be kind of like a blast from the past for you. You'll enjoy it. If you're scared of the word woke, then this is going to be a horror movie for you. So if you like horror movies that way, then maybe press play as well. It's just like such a strange movie that I think, people who love the strange and bizarre in cinema will certainly get into this one and, appreciate it for what it is. And, with me, none of that messaging is lost on me. Like, I totally get it. It is certainly a bizarre one. Let's just say that. If you like the bizarre, you can pick this movie to watch. As for a rating, well, with this one, I am going to give it the average score of 5. However, keep in mind that I'm the professional amateur hour here, and I watch a lot of B movies, and so this 5 is 5 on the B movie scale. It's a very average B movie, and so yeah, I think that's an appropriate, score for this one. And with that being said, I think that's all I wanted to say. So like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.